explore the te'amim, nekudot, tagin, and the otiyot, or Tanta in short, which are the 4 levels that make up the spiritual realm. The next thing that we need to know is that the 4 spiritual levels known as Tanta also correspond to another commonly used system of dividing the levels of spirituality, what's known as Nar Nechi, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. How do these 2 methods of classification relate to each other? We'll start from the bottom up. The otiyot, i.e. the letters, relate to the level of Nefesh. The tagin, i.e. the crowns of the letters, relate to the level of Ruach. The nekudot relate to the level of Neshama. The te'amim relate to the level of Chaya, and ever the more so to the level of Yechida. Remember this chart and where it is situated in the series of films. Of course, you can always return to it for reference in order to refresh your knowledge of all these different systems of dividing and classifying the spiritual realm. However, for the meantime, we'll focus mainly upon the 2 divisions known as Asmab and Tanta, since the Arizal speaks extensively about these 2 divisions in the teachings that we'll be summarizing in this series of films. When we get into the details, we learn that the division known as Tanta is found not only on the general level, but on the private level as well. In other words, each one of the general levels of Tanta is comprised out of its very own 4 levels of private Tanta divisions. Similarly, the other division known as Asmab, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ben, is also found both on the general level as well as on the private level, as each one of the 4 levels of Asmab is comprised out of its very own 4 levels of private Asmab divisions. Not only that, but we must also become acquainted with the combination of these 2 systems of dividing the spiritual realm between the Asmab and the Tanta, as sometimes we'll be speaking about the division of Asmab on the general level compared to the division of Tanta on the private level. On the other hand, sometimes we'll be speaking about the division of Tanta on the general level compared to the division of Asmab on the private level. You should also know that for a great portion of this series of lessons, we'll be discussing not only the general and the private levels of the spiritual realm, but also an even more private level, what we could probably call in English private to the 2nd degree. Specifically, in this series of lessons, we'll be discussing the 2nd degree private levels of Ab de Sag, i.e. the private level of Ab of the general level of Sag. Now, I'd like to bring to your attention several very important pieces of knowledge regarding the levels of Asmab, and particularly about the expansion known as Shem Ben. When we pay careful attention to the gematria, i.e. the numerological value of the different levels of Asmab, we notice that as we descend through these levels, their numerological value also descends. From a gematria of 72 in the expansion of Shem Ab, down to a gematria of 63 in the expansion of Shem Sag, down to a gematria of 45 in the expansion of Shem Ma. However, when we investigate the 4th and last level in the Asmab, i.e. the expansion of Shem Ben, we find that its gematria is actually greater than the gematria of Shem Ma. As we can see, the gematria of Shem Ma is 45, compared to the gematria of 52 of the expansion of Shem Ben. Doesn't this abnormality contradict the rule of thumb that we stated earlier? Namely, that as we descend through these levels, their numerological value also descends. In order to resolve this seeming contradiction, we need to know that although the gematria of the expansion of Shem Ben is indeed 52, nevertheless, in some respects, this particular spiritual level is essentially only a simple Yod-K Vav-K with a gematria of only 26, which is actually lower than the gematria of Shem Ma. You should probably be asking, what's behind this fancy accounting? In the writings of the Arizal, we find that Shem Ben is referred to by the synonym Machpelah, as in Me'arat HaMachpelah, the famous cave in Hebron where our forefathers and foremothers are buried. As our sages point out, this burial cave is called Machpelah since the root of this word is kefel, i.e. double or multiple, for the fact that it is actually a double cave, one cave on top of another cave, as well as for the fact that it is the resting place of several pairs, of Adam and Chava, of Abraham and Sarah, of Yitzchak and Rivka, as well as of Yaakov and Leah. As we already mentioned, the expansion of Shem Ben also has several multiplications, both in its letters and its numerological value. But before we focus on the multiplication that is most relevant to our current discussion in order to resolve our above-mentioned discrepancy, I'd like to first point out some of the other multiplications that we find in the expansion of Shem Ben. When we focus on the letter Yod of Shem Ben, we take to heart that the letter Yod, which is one of the four foundational letters of the general Yod-K Vav-K, has a gematria of 10. As you can also see, its expansion letters Vav and Dalet also have a combined gematria of 10. This is one of the many multiplications that the Arizal points out. And when we focus on the first letter Hey of Shem Ben, we take to heart that this Hey, which is the second of four foundational letters of the general Yod-K Vav-K, has a gematria of 5. And of course, the same holds for the expansion letter Hey, that also has a gematria of 5. This is yet another multiplication. Now we'll focus on the letter Vav of Shem Ben and point out another multiplication. The foundational letter Vav has a gematria of 6, which obviously is also the gematria of the expansion letter Vav. And when we focus on the last letter Hey of Shem Ben, we notice how the foundational letter Hey has the gematria of 5. And of course, the same holds for the expansion letter Hey, that also has a gematria of 5. This is yet another multiplication. In spite of all these noteworthy multiplications, the most relevant multiplication to our current discussion is actually a very general multiplication. When we isolate the four foundational letters that make up the general Yod-K Vav-K and tally up their combined gematria, we find the value of 26. Now we'll tally up all the expansion letters of Shem Ben, and we find that they also have the combined value of 26. We can finally take to heart that although the expansion of Shem Ben does at the end of the day have the numerological value of 52, nevertheless, in some respects, we can certainly look at this fourth and last spiritual level as only one general Yod-K Vav-K, which has the gematria of only 26. According to this, it comes out that all four expansions of Asmab actually descend in their gematria, from 72 down to 63, and from 63 down to 45, and from 45 down to 26. Based on what we just learned, that Shem Ben is called Machpelah in reference to all of its multiplications, and of course, the most relevant multiplication of all is that Shem Ben could be looked at as one general Yod-K Vav-K with a gematria of 26. If not for the fact that more often than not, we look at this holy name as a double Yod-K Vav-K, which is why we more often than not look at Shem Ben as having a gematria of 52 instead of only 26. Another glaring nuance regarding the expansion of Shem Ben, which you may have already picked up on, is the fact that the Arizal calls this expansion by the name Shem Ben as opposed to Shem Nab, the way we would have traditionally called it. By referring to this holy name as Shem Ben, the Arizal precedes the letter Bet, which is representative of the singles unit, followed by the letter Nun, which is representative of the tens unit. On the other hand, when we examine the first three expansions, which are Ab, Sag, and Ma, we notice how in all of them it is the tens unit that precedes the singles unit as customary, and not the other way around. What's the reason for this nuance? As we know, there are several different methods of configuring the gematria of a word. Till now, though, in all our previous configurations, we used only the traditional gematria method, what's known as Mispar Gadol. However, there is another commonly used method of configuration called Mispar Katan. There are several steps in calculating the Mispar Katan of a word. In step 1, we configure the traditional gematria of each and every letter in and of its own. In step 2, we remove the zeros that belong to the tens unit and the hundreds unit of each and every letter, if there are any zeros. In step 3, we add together all the remaining digits, after we removed all the zeros in the previous step. And in the fourth and last step, we add together all the digits in the third step. That is the Mispar Katan. How is all of this related to our current discussion? Rabbi Shimshon from Istrapoli points out that when we examine the Mispar Katan of the first three expansions of Asmab, namely Ab, Sag, and Ma, we'll notice how they all have a Mispar Katan of 9. If so, then we should probably expect that the fourth expansion will also have a Mispar Katan of 9. This is exactly the reason why the Arizal made the subtle nuance of calling this expansion Shem Ben and not Shem Nab. As we're about to demonstrate, Shem Nab actually has a Mispar Katan of only 7, since the letter Nun combined with the letter Bet amount to a Mispar Katan of 7 and not 9, like we would expect from the fourth expansion in order to match the Mispar Katan of 9 that we found in the first three expansions. And you should probably be asking, what difference does it make whether we refer to this expansion as Shem Ben or Shem Nab? Shouldn't they both have the same Mispar Katan? After all, they both have the same two letters, Nun and Bet. However, Rabbi Shimshon from Istropoli points out that there actually is a difference between the regular Nun of Shem Nab and the Nun Sofit at the end of Shem Ben. What's the difference? In one of the systems of configuring the Gematria, we find a very significant nuance with regards to the 5 Otiyot Sofiyot, which are the letters that change when they are positioned at the end of a word, namely the last letters of Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Pei, and Chaf. Man Tzepach in abbreviations. How so? These 5 Otiyot Sofiyot complete the hundreds unit, following the letters Kuf, Reish, Shin, and Taf, the highest of which has a value of 400. According to this system, Chaf Sofit has the value of 500, Mem Sofit has the value of 600, Nun Sofit has the value of 700, Pei Sofit has the value of 800, and Tzadik Sofit has the value of 900. Of course, the most relevant detail for our discussion is the fact that according to this system of configuration, it comes out that Nun Sofit has a numerological value of 700, as opposed to only 50 according to the conventional system of configuration. If so, then it comes out that the Mispar Katan of Shem Ben is actually 7 plus 2. 7 for Nun and 2 for Bet, which together amount to 9. The same as the other 3 expansions, Ab, Sak, and Ma. This insight is definitely noteworthy, but how is it relevant to our discussion? In other words, what's so special about the Mispar Katan of 9 to the point that the Arizal went out of his way to call this expansion Shem Ben and not Shem Nab? Rabbi Shimshon from Istropoli explains that 9 is also the Mispar Katan of Emet, which the Talmud tells us is God's hallmark or emblem. Inasmuch, this highlights the unity of the infinite Creator within all the Sefirot and all the Partzufim that He emanated. Not only that, but Rabbi Shimshon from Istropoli continues to clarify that the Mispar Katan of 9 that all 4 expansions of Asmab have in common actually corresponds to the 9 Sefirot that make up each and every Partzuf. These 9 Sefirot are Keter, Chochma, Bina, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. This insight impresses upon us that the 4 expansions, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ben, collectively make up all the spiritual levels of all the Sefirot and of all the Partzufim. At this point, I'll certainly expect you to ask, why did we enumerate only 9 Sefirot in each and every Partzuf and not 10? After all, everybody knows that there are actually 10 Sefirot and not only 9. True. However, in many places, the Arizal describes the makeup of a Partzuf as having 3 levels, 3 floors if you will, one on top of another. The first and highest level contains 3 Sefirot, Keter, Chochma, and Binah. Kachab in abbreviations. The second level contains the three Sefirot, Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet. Chagat in abbreviations. Finally, the third and lowest level contains the three Sefirot, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. Nahi in abbreviations. So where is the Sephira of Malchut? Because the Arizal usually speaks about a male Partzuf, therefore there is no need to single out the Sephira of Malchut individually. After all, the Malchut corresponds to the crown on top of the Yesod, i.e., the place which is revealed during the act of circumcision. Therefore, since the crown is connected and included with the main part of the Yesod, the Arizal often does not enumerate the Malchut as the 10th Sephira of every Partzuf. But certainly, every Partzuf does have a 10th Sephira called Malchut, whether the Arizal actually enumerates it or not. And for those of you who have already forgotten how we got here in our discussion, our goal was to clarify why the Arizal refers to the fourth expansion of Asmab as Shem Ben and not Shem Nab.